So on this note, really interesting conversation we're going to have now with Risha. And, Risha will give you a little bit about her whole background. But what I love about Risha is she's on, I don't know if it's your third life or your fourth life. But she's on one of those next lives. And, I always champion people who have the courage to go and kind of leave a place of comfort to go, I wonder if there is more of me out there, and how do I stretch wide and tall to figure that out? And even though our conversation is going to be around staying put in the, probably for all kinds of reasons in the economy that we're in, we couldn't have a better person having this talk. So Risha, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the support, the endorsement, and just the platform to be able to speak with your community. It's a pleasure and an honor to come back and
Yes.
speak to your community. It's always such a pleasure to also see like all of the great work that you're doing, Salian. So I cannot talk about it enough. Super
So
excited to talk to all of you.
yeah, so I'm really excited about, us talking about this issue of staying put, right? So we're going to talk about, that opposite of shifting and staying put. And, some of the questions, we're kind of go to back and forth on some of these questions. And we're going to start, and I want everyone to feel free to jot in your questions as we're talking, because this is going to be a conversation amongst all of us. And we're going to start with this basic question, which is, how do I know if I'm even being paid fair in the position that I'm in, and what are the resources around to help me decide that? Right? Let's start with that, Risha.
Let's start there. And I'm actually like really want this to be an interactive conversation, as you were saying. So would first of all love to see other folks join us on camera, as many folks as they can. Don't worry about whatever your background looks. We all have been working from home long enough to appreciate whatever background we have going. And I want to open this question up for you all also to kind of share with me first, what have you done to figure out if you are being fairly compensated at work, before I kind of share some of other tips. Anyone? Like, feel free. Can they unmute their mic and talk?
And if you're shy, you can put it in chat. Sometimes some people are shy.
Yeah.
How do you know if you're being compensated fairly or not? So I'm going to share a story on this, Risha, with you as everyone thinks about it, and they're going to type in some answers for you. When I was head of people at Careem, my founders came to me one time and they said to me, we want to be like Google, and we want it to be very transparent what everybody makes. Mm-hmm. So we want to be able to post it and put it out there for everyone. And I looked at them and I asked a simple question. I said, is our workforce mature enough to handle that? And they looked at me and they go, no, then it's a bad idea, right? Our average age of our workforce was very young, 23. Mm-hmm. And because we believed in pay on equal, Risha, and pay on equal for us there was kind of Pareto's rule, right? 20% was contributing to 80% of the business, and they did not get compensated like someone traditional in that role. They were fast tracked. Sometimes they were making double or triple because their contribution was more. So if we actually put that out there, we knew we were going to have a lot of issues just because we had a really, really young workforce in a particular part of the world that would not understand that. They understood just progressive, every year I make X amount more. If that person came in the same time as me, they should be making the same amount as me. So that,
and it's such a fascinating perspective, and I think such an important question to begin our discussions with. And the reason I say that is that lack of information is your biggest asset, right? And so lack of information is keeping you in the dark. Right? And so think about, would you rather not know, or would you rather know that you are being unfairly compensated and do something about it? Okay. Mm-hmm. Like information has a lot of power. And so when I was at Amazon, Amazon actually has an internal Slack channel where everybody posts their salaries. They post a breakdown of what their base salary is, what their sign-on bonus was, what their RSUs were when they were offered a job at Amazon, and wherever they are right now, they say like, this was the starting, this is where I'm. And like literally there were hundreds of messages that were like new messages that were coming in every single day. And that was our internal pay transparency Slack channel. Okay. It's an opportunity for you to see what the other person is making, what you could be making.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so like, it's different than what you're talking about. So I think it depends a lot on the culture, obviously.
Yeah, we had a culture.
Yeah, a lot depends on the culture of the company, depends on the culture of the people that are working there. But at Amazon, like I want to share that example because that gave a lot of power to anybody, like to know whether they are being fairly compensated or not, right? And again, keeping this front and center that everybody has different experiences, they bring in different level of experiences into the job, and that has the determination into how much you make. There would be differences between like the locations, so San Francisco would be paid differently than somebody in Texas would be paid differently in New York, but at least it allows you to get more information.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So with that being said, like, let me see if somebody did put something in chat, but again, would love to hear from you all, like, what are you doing to find out if you're being paid fairly or not? But very early on, like I can share this example with you all. Very early on, I decided to find, like, I was gonna get promoted to a role, and I wanted to know how much to ask for in terms of the pay increase. Okay, and I just asked the person who was in this role. Okay, I asked them, would you be comfortable sharing the range that you make? Okay, I did like put them on the spot, and I gave them an option. If you're not comfortable sharing, that's fine. But I really do want to make sure that I'm paid fairly, and if you can share information on the range that your salary falls in, like that would be very helpful information to me. Okay, and they did share their salary range with me, and I was able to use that to negotiate better. And I've used the same, like asking, like I asked when I got an offer at Amazon, I was offered 185 to begin with, and I talked to 3 friends who worked at Amazon and asked them, what do you make? Can you share it with me? They were kind of working the similar roles as I was, and so they shared with me. I used that information to be able to negotiate up to 204.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's so much power in just asking. Ask, what do you make? Like if you're having informational chats on LinkedIn with people, like ask them, I want to make sure that I position myself well for the negotiations conversation. Would you mind sharing the range, that your salary falls within? Excuse me. And so that's like the big one that I want to offer everybody.
Does anybody have any thoughts and feedback?
My thoughts on this one, the point that Sally had made, and I think, when you open up, this becomes opening up salary negotiation. And I have a background as a management consultant, but it's like a Pandora's box. So you've got to sort of put boundaries around it to be able to curtail conversations. Otherwise, as far as the people management team goes, all you're doing, or the reward team goes, all you're doing is justifying salaries to people, right? Because as Sally Ann said, individual maturity matters. Can you handle discussions like this? And there's a way to go about it in a constructive manner, because it has the potential to blow up as well, right? And you've got to be very mindful of what you're bringing to the table. What are your skills? What are your strengths? How are you a level above other people?
Yeah. It absolutely is. It requires a level of maturity on our side as employees, right? And to be able to understand that this is the value that I do bring to the table. This is what the market pays for this role. Okay. And again, back to like, how much information can I collect? How much data can I collect to have a mature discussion with the management about that pay gap that may or may not exist, or the whatever promotion raise you wanna ask for. And so asking is the first one, because it does break the taboo around sharing your salary. Like unless you break that taboo, like we're gonna continue to have the pay disparity. But then also go to these other websites. Like there's freely available information, especially I can talk a little bit about salaries and information in tech. So levels.fyi, for those of you who want to understand like how much people in tech get paid, levels.fyi is a great place to go. Like, in addition to Glassdoor talks more about like averages. And so I like it better for like non-tech companies, but for tech companies, levels.fyi is a great place to be. Gayatri has her hand up, so I want to take that question or comment that you have.
Hi. I'm in mental health, so it's a bit different in terms of working. I work for myself, but my clients are in Europe, in the Caribbean, And I live in Norway where, I mean, tax bracket is very high. So my struggle sometimes is the fact that I'm paying high taxes in a company that's registered here. But I also have to justify the price in places where it's really, really expensive. And I struggle with that. So any advice on like, you know, how I can easily maneuver that, I would appreciate it.
It's a learning journey, right? So I have been working full time for myself for 6 months, and it has been a learning journey, lots of self-coaching that I'm continuing to do every single day on believing in the price that I should be charging. Okay. And also overcoming limiting beliefs that people in countries where the currency's value is lower would be able to pay your prices this higher. So I'll give you an example. So I had this limiting belief that people, like I would not be able to work with people in India because I charge in USD. And so like people in India cannot necessarily pay 6 grand or 7 grand, whatever my pricing is, to work with me. Okay. And that was my limiting belief. Until one lady did reach out to me, and she just kind of signed up on the spot. And through discussions, then I found out that she makes closer to an equivalent of 300K in India. So it was my limiting belief to think that there aren't people who exist who can pay my price. But if you can offer value and you can show value, then they would pay your price in a heartbeat. Okay. So maybe that's what I can offer you. That was my learning curve. I'm learning every single day. I'm self-coaching every single day that I can actually charge.
Richa, have a similar experience. I think it's all about the value that you're offering. You know, if you're offering value which is above way above what everyone else is offering, then I think you're able to operate in the market and people don't mind paying.
Yeah. And I think a lot of like that value, it's understanding what value you offer, but there is a journey to go through. That is what I'm learning, that there's a journey to go through to believe that you offer value, even though that
and the exhausting conversations along with it.
I'm in the process of figuring out the value for myself as opposed to like, like I know what I'm worth, but it's the perception. I think it's more the perception around where they're hesitant to pay the price as opposed to here, they're quite happy to.
Yeah. And I think the only way to do that is really to seek out examples of where you can see that limiting belief is being broken. So for example, I do follow a coach on Instagram. I've been kind of following her for 2 years, and I know for a fact that she works with people from India, Bangladesh, and I know her pricing. So I know people pay her. So that means that if I show enough value, people will be able to pay my prices.
Thank you.
And I think one of the things
it's also about being a little bold. I think, you know, you've got to be a little bold, and because along with that comes the risk, and you have to accept the risk of losing potential clients, right?
Yeah.
But you know, and that gives you enough ammunition. If you lose, say, 10 clients, then that gives you enough ammunition to be able to tackle questions in a different manner and maneuver the conversation differently on your 11th one.
Yeah.
So I agree with that.
I just wanted to add one point to Gayatri on here, you know, in terms of how in positioning GLEAC, you know, it's one of those things of making a decision. I really can't be everything to everyone, but I can be something to someone. And that something to someone might be a tiny, tiny little sliver of a niche, but you own that piece of real estate and that niche, right? And you hone in on that in terms of your value proposition, in terms of what you know you can deliver in spades, and in terms of what that costs, right? So, you know, I think sometimes when we're starting out in our own business, you know, we just want to make sure, like, okay, do I even have the business, right? And can I reach this market and that market? And sometimes you just have to hold on to be able to set that. At least certainly that is what I have found in terms of GLEAC, right? You know, I can't tell you how many people, even in the India market, goes, what? That's the price that you're charging? Look at all the other edutech and what they charge. And I go, well, you know, I'm not them.
I mean, there'll always be people who would think like $1,000 is too much, and there would always be people who would think like $10,000 is just the right price.
Yeah.
Find your people.
Let's go on to our next question.
Okay. Risha, we have 2 specific questions in chat from one of our attendees. If you can answer them, thank you.
Yes. Yeah. I see one. Am I missing?
It's 2, yes, together from me.
The first one First one, they say that I have a diploma in mechanical engineering, followed by PMP lead with 20 years of experience. My employer still wants bachelor degree for giving promotion. Please advise. And so, couple ways to think about it, right? There are some employers, some companies that do need that check the box to be able to promote you. Like they do need to check the box to have that degree to be able to promote you. And so my advice on that is for every company that would require you to check that box, there are 10 others that don't. And so this is not that place where I advise you to necessarily stay. Like I would advise you to think about what are your other options. Okay, if you are like continuing to hit that wall with promotion, for every company that you work for, there are 10 other companies. Like there are 100 other companies that you could be working at. So something for you to think about, right? But the second is like, are you like, you know, what's the extent of your discussions with your management about the experience that you've had and how you are the valuable, like you're one of the, how you're adding value, like, or are you indispensable? Like if they lose you, would that be do you know if that would be a problem for them? Okay. And how are you positioning your experience and your work and the value that you bring in? Okay. I don't know enough details about that, but like I would really encourage you to think about and steer this discussion away from, oh, I need a promotion, but I don't have a bachelor's. Like, how do we overcome that? To really start making this a more value-based discussion. And that's what we hear a lot about again and again in this discussion today is like, you have to start making our discussions value-based. This is the value that I bring to the top line, this is the value I bring to the bottom line, and use that to talk about like how, you know, you need to go to the next step so that you can bring greater value to the organization.
Yeah, but that requires you knowing what value you're bringing, right?
It always does. Yeah, I mean, all of our discussion around you staying put in negotiating a better deal requires you to fully and 120% understand the value that you bring to the table.
Yeah.
And what makes you indispensable. Because unless you do that, like how will you make your case better?
Yeah. And I'm really glad that you're highlighting that. All right, next question. Let's go.
I think so there's the second question here in chat. Let's take that. During pandemic, big salary reduction was done and same is still continuing with the normal 3% increment. Business has improved. The company situation has improved. Still the company wants to keep me on the same reduced salary. Please advise. So again, that discussion, like what's your BATNA? What's your fallback option? So this concept of BATNA, I would encourage you to think about and explore. BATNA stands for what's the best alternative to negotiated agreement. Okay, BATNA. It's really like what's your fallback option? That's what it means. Simple terms, what's your backup option? So if the company says no, we're going to keep you in reduced salary. Sure, the company's position is improving, but we can't improve salaries anymore. What's your backup option? Even as you think about like negotiating a better deal in any situation in your workplace, you have to think about if you don't get the deal that you want, what's your fallback option? Okay, like your fallback option could be to do nothing. Okay, maybe that's your fallback option and you are fine with that. Okay, and that's okay. And or your fallback option could be you can easily find something else in the market because you've made yourself skilled enough, competitive enough, your network is strong enough that you will be able to find something very quickly outside. Okay, so the stronger you make your fallback option, the more or the better you would be at this negotiations conversation about getting a better deal to where you are right now. That's what I would say on that. Yeah.
What are some common mistakes we employees make when negotiating? I know you talked about not knowing their value, but what are some others?
Not knowing that value is the first one. Then I would say not the two others are not believing in that value enough, like not believing in themselves enough. In that's the other common one that I find, especially with like women. I have to talk about women a little bit, right? Like I support the advancements of women. So women, other underrepresented groups, other groups with the communities with intersectionality, like all of those, like we don't believe in ourselves enough. Like we have to believe that we do bring value. And then we have to understand what value we bring. And the third one I would say is like not preparing enough for the conversation, like trying to wing it or not trying to self-reflect on the hard questions that may come to you during that conversation. And I've found myself in making that mistake a couple of times. Excuse me, I'm just gonna have a sip of water. Where I'm like preparing for a conversation, and I'm all the way up to like thinking about what's the pushback I can get. You know, they can say, "Oh, the company's not doing very well. Oh, nobody's getting promoted right now, so you cannot be promoted. Like we cannot promote you." So you anticipate all these questions, but then you don't think through how you would answer the hard question, because it's uncomfortable to think through answering the hard question. So you have to kind of go all the way in thinking through how you would answer any and all like hard questions that will come your way, or the pushback that will come your way. So preparation is also quite key. That's the third one that I would say, third mistake. What do you say, Salian? What?
I have a question. I'm going to flip the question on you. Stand now in the employer's shoes that does not want to give a raise to someone. And in certain markets, let's say like India, every year, like in tech, they want a 30% raise because that's culturally what happens, where raises are not based on value, it's based on time. Give me some thoughts on that.
That's an interesting one, right? Like I'm kind of thinking about, I do a lot of work with the public sector here in Canada.
Yep.
And public sector is kind of very similar to some other cultures where it's like bureaucratic. There's a certain amount of time that you need to put in to be able to go up.
Yep.
Okay. But I want to again challenge you. That's a limiting belief, because I've worked with enough people in the government now. We've done 6 cohorts of our program. I've talked to 65 women that I know that despite of what the overall say is that you have to put in the time, it's not always that. There is always a way to be able to promote yourself enough, to be able to strategically build the networks, to be able to not go through the competitive process. Like this morning I was talking to somebody and she said, I don't have the degree to check the box to go through the competitive process. But then there is this other way, like talent management process, through which you essentially get pulled up. Okay, so like find out, start with challenging that limiting belief. Like start with saying there is another way possible. I'm going to find out what is that other way possible for me to showcase value and like bypass this time limit. And I'm not saying that that's not a limitation, right? Like it's making your life harder for sure, but there is always a way.
Okay. What about when you're negotiating a better deal for yourself? How specific, how important is it to have a specific figure in mind? Salary, benefits, or perks? Talk to me around that.
Yeah, I like to take this back to that. This is really like a negotiations conversation. In negotiations conversation, 80% of the game is won by preparation. Okay. And so a big mistake that I see people often make is that they don't know what their floor is. Like what's the minimum acceptable number to them is. Okay. So like they would come in in the conversation and they would often say, oh, I would like a raise. How much? Like, don't know. Like, so they don't have a specific number, or they would just like come in with, either they would come in like with no number at all, or they were just like super hesitant when they're put on the spot, right? And when the other person say, okay, we can do a 3%, then you don't know what to say, because you don't know if 3% is something that you would accept, it's okay or not okay. So the best thing I would say is like prepare as much as possible and really understand what's the floor that you would accept, like what's the minimum raise that you would accept, and then what's the ideal raise that you would accept. Okay, it's like a bargaining conversation. Okay, and then go in with a specific number, like make a specific ask that's a little bit beyond what you would accept. Like that's a little bit beyond the ideal. Okay, so like if you go in, you ask for a 12% raise, and then if you get, and you're okay at getting like a 8 to 10%, right? And then again, make it back value-based conversation. So value-based conversation, like I achieved this particular result I closed one of my biggest clients this year, or we delivered this project like 2 months ahead of time, this much ahead of budget, this much I had a budget, like all of that, like make it back to like value-based conversation. Like this is how we achieve the goals of the organization, not about like I need a raise because the inflation is eating into my cost. I just bought a house, and don't make it about you. They don't care about you. They care about.
And I think for me, what it is I was getting at in that prior is don't make it about time. I've been here for a year. I've been here for a 2 year. I deserve, right? And the value prop of it, you can't express that, or you can't express how that has increased or that has improved anything for the business.
Oh yeah, and I see this happen all the time. I was coaching one of my one-on-one clients this morning about this as well. That don't equate your compensation to the time that you've put in. Equate your compensation with the value that you've achieved for the org. And it doesn't matter whether you achieve that value in 2 months, whether it took you 2 years to achieve that value. And so you can kind of like flip it on its head as well. In terms of, I can share like what I was coaching this lady on was, she was afraid that she cannot ask for more because she has only been on the job for 3 months. And the rest of the 9 months she was on maternity. So she's like, oh, I was only on the job for like 3 months. Rest of the, 6 months was on maternity, not 9 months. So 6 months was on maternity, XYZ. And so I don't know if I can ask for like 12% raise. I'm like, why not? What did you achieve in the 3 months you were there? Okay, and she had achieved a lot, right? Like she was a chief of staff. She's really established like India operations for a particular organization. I'm like, did you establish enough mechanisms in place that allow the things to keep running, not only just keep running and surviving, but like thriving? She's like, yes. Okay, so then you've added enough value to be able to justify that.
And that's where the pay unequal comes in, right? I've always been a big believer in that, Risha. And I always share this story of my past EA Joy, who I hired as a student, as an intern, at giving just a couple hours, at a $12 an hour rate. She was making about $500 a month, and then within 3 months, she got herself up to, I realized she had a finance background, and we were doing our first fundraise, and she went through that whole process with me, and she got to $2,500 a month. And now, a year and a half later, she's the head of people at a unicorn making $8,000 a month.
Yeah.
And I often, it's such a pride and joy because that pay on equal of looking at the value creation. And this is, I think, transparency becomes a problem in smaller organizations, because if you are already operating on a pay on equal, it's very difficult when you don't, culture wise, maturity wise, when you have a company like Amazon that process is in place and it's a well greased wheel. I think it's easier. I think with smaller organizations, it will be harder.
I want to challenge that, right? Like it's not easier or harder depending on like small or big organization. It's easier or harder depending on the culture that leaders are creating, right? So if you're creating that pay unequal culture, it's also the responsibility of the leaders to communicate why they have a pay unequal culture, that it is value-based.
I like that. And you're correct. It is completely value-based.
Because like somebody at Amazon can be like as like, what's the right word? They can create as much noise as a small organization as to why I'm paid unequally. If they don't have the maturity to understand that it's really based on like the value and the value that you bring to the table coming in and the value that you create at the table.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. That's I like that pushback from you. In your experience, what are some effective negotiation techniques that employees can use? Give me a couple of examples.
Yeah, so the first one I would say is like, don't make it a surprise. Like, don't surprise your manager with your request for a salary raise, promotion, or any of that. Like, let it be a surprise. Plant that seed. So I really encourage every single person, hard-burning question. I really encourage every single person to have a monthly career conversation in place. Like this is what I call a monthly career conversation. So this is not your weekly meeting where you're talking about your like day-to-day work or projects. Okay, this is not your formal twice a year, once a year performance review conversation. Okay, this is a monthly meeting with your manager where you and them are talking only about your career goals and aspirations. Okay. Where do you want to go to 1 year from now? You talk about, how far you are from goals, like black and white goals that you're setting for the next level. Next level could be a next level promotion, it could be a salary raise, whatever that is. And then you talk about why are you great? Like get feedback on what are your strengths, why are you great, and what are the areas that you can improve. Okay, so what that does is like it provides you a platform on a monthly basis to talk about how are you doing and how far away you are from that next raise or promotion. And so it takes the surprise element, like they know that this is coming and they know why this is coming because you are delivering on your black and white goals that you set together.
Yeah, I love that. And I love Gayatri. Why don't you ask the question and then I will. Let's go.
I'm sorry, I keep raising my hand because I just don't want to interrupt.
Everything is
Why are you sorry about raising your hand? No.
Gayatri,
Yeah.
it's cool. It's like it's the good
thing. We're talking about culture a lot, and one of the things that just keeps popping up is the relevance of country culture and organization culture, the organization itself, their culture, and how different or how much it impacts negotiation around like salary or even increase in salary, because different countries have different ways in which they see promotions and incremental change in financial gains, whatever you want to say. Where I live right now is very transparent, so you know what to expect. You have a range, but in other countries you don't find that so easily. So how do you approach something like that?
Yeah, and some countries don't make it easier, right? Like some organizations don't make it easy, some countries don't make it easy. But just because something is a little bit harder to find doesn't mean that you can find it. So I'm gonna go back to ask. Have you asked others? What have you tried to find out? Like, have you searched on Google enough? Have you tried to find out in forums like Reddit and Team Blind? What's available? Have you really asked people in your company? There are no laws that say that they can't share information, right? Like they can't share their salary. Is there just perceptions? They're like socially acceptable norms. Okay, so in some countries, it may be acceptable to just like ask directly, what is your salary? Like I asked 3 of my friends in the US, as I said, what is your salary? In some other places, and maybe cultures, companies, teams, and other people, like you don't know, it's probably better to ask what range does your salary fall within. Okay, so like I go back to like you ask, the asking may be difficult, a little bit more difficult, and you may have to come a little bit softer in your ask, but you ask and the information will be there. There's no law prohibiting that companies can't share the salaries, or like people can't share their salaries with others. There's only taboo, yeah.
And I'll add in here, negotiating is not only about money. It could be in the form of perks. Let's talk about that.
Oh yeah, like I often find like candidates make this mistake where they are like so fixated on the salary, and it's really not just only about the salary. There are so many other things that you could negotiate. I think I have like if you go to my LinkedIn feed, there is a post about like all the different things that you can negotiate, but like your sign-on bonus, your performance bonus, your stock options, vacation benefits, health benefits, reimbursement for certain amount of things, reimbursement for your phone, for your vehicle. There's like all sorts of things you can do that there. You can negotiate, like if I meet XYZ goals, like in a year I would be promoted. Like you can have that negotiation. I had a friend in the States who negotiated a 30-day notice for layoffs. No companies give notice for layoffs in the States, like, not that I know of. But he was able to negotiate a 30-day notice for layoff with an H-1B because that was what was important to him. A client of mine, I helped them negotiate a 20K increase in sign-on bonus because we started off with negotiating vacation benefits. And the company said like there's a set vacation benefit, so they gave him more sign-on bonus. There's like basically think about your compensation as an overall package and it's not just salary. Okay, so what I like to suggest is you have to go back to what's important to you, and what's important to the person next door doesn't have to be what's important to you. Okay, for somebody else, money may be the most important thing. For you, money may be the most important thing, but it's also okay to like identify what's important to you and negotiate that. So I'm going to give you like an example to make it a little bit more tangible, and that pertains to our original discussion around like negotiating a deal and why you would stay. Right? Why would you stay at a company when many a times when you jump ship, you can make more money. Okay, but why would you want to stay? So when I was at Schlumberger, right after I finished my MBA, I was looking for opportunities outside. I was kind of in my role for 3 years, nothing was moving, wasn't very happy about it. And so I started like looking for opportunities outside. I landed a role outside. It was a great role. I accepted the offer, and then after that, Schlumberger made me even better offer internally. Like I hadn't told them about this other offer that I had, but basically they were like I was working internally as well to make a promotion happen for me, and they made me an offer for a different role, and it was a role that I wanted. Like it was a role that allowed me to get the things and experience that I wanted. It did not come with a salary raise. Okay, so then I made the decision to say no to this external role that I was getting to accept the position internally, right? Because when I reflected back on what was important to me, it was important for me to continue maintaining the relationships that I had built at Schlumberger. Okay, it was important for me to get that type of experience that they were giving, even though it did not come with the salary raise. And I tried to negotiate that. There wasn't room there because I was actually going to a function that overall pays lower than engineering. So I understood that, but then I made the choice to stay because it warranted me the experience that I needed at the time. Okay, so it's a very personal choice. You have to understand and go back to like what is important to you. Okay, there's some benefits that come with staying staying with the role with the company, right? I love the culture. I love the people. I love the culture. I had great relationships. I was a respected leader. I wanted to continue building on those relationships to keep moving up. Okay, it was more important to me than like another 5K increase that I was going to get outside. So you have to come back to what's important to you.
Yeah. And I would ask you this question. Do you think remote work, flexible work hours, that still holds the value, or did the value of that change because of COVID?
What do you want to expand on that? What does
Yeah. So let's say prior to COVID, you being able to work from home, you remember there was all this press about it.
Like a privilege.
Like it was like a privilege, right?
Yeah.
It was just like, oh, one day a week you can go to the WeWork offices, or not. It was like there was a whole bunch of press around that, and flexible hours. And I think, I guess, did COVID dilute that perk?
Maybe, yeah. I don't know if I would say like it diluted that perk. It just made it more accessible, right? Like the remote work, hybrid work, all that situation just made it a norm. I don't necessarily think about it that it diluted the perk. I mean, just made that perk more accessible. So now you have more power because if you already know that this company has, it's like healthcare benefit, right? Like you don't negotiate healthcare benefits, like that's a given. So if you know that's a given, like a hybrid work or remote work for this particular company that you are seeking a position with, then it's more power to you. You already know that. And you can negotiate other things.
Yeah. Okay. How can employees leverage their skills to negotiate a higher salary or more advanced role? And I don't know, I think you might have answered this in that question in chat, because I think you're getting always back to value. It doesn't matter.
Getting always back to value, but maybe I can add one more thing here. I would say that learning is a lifelong process. Okay, so you have to always think about how can you upskill? What are the latest skills and technologies that you should gain to stay relevant in your role and to stay relevant in the market? Okay, and so whatever like space you are in, like data is now relevant, like regardless of whatever function you're in, like regardless of whether you're marketing or engineering, like some sort of like understanding and skill set around understanding and assimilating and showcasing data is always useful. Like, so I would add, like, you have to continue working on upskilling, because that's also part of the value proposition. What do you say, Sal?
Yeah, I mean, if I actually have made learning mandatory because I'll tell you, I look at it as another way, right? As an employer, if I don't make it mandatory, I'm not getting the value that I'm paying for the role, because roles are just shifting and evolving. And it's almost that if I don't make it mandatory, then that whole value prop doesn't exist equal, it doesn't exist fairly for the company. If we are going to remain relevant, right? Because most companies now really have to ask the question, am I going to be relevant a year from now or 18 months from now with everything that is happening in the market across all sectors, right? And how can I ensure that, the money I was paying yesterday is going to equal the same value today without me upskilling mandatorily the employee, right? That's the headspace I'm in.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense, right? From an employer's perspective, that makes so much sense. And from the employee's perspective, you should think about, if my employer had a choice to hire someone who has the same number of years of experience, who have had the same type of experience, and who is able to market their experience the same way, right? You're both good at personal branding and marketing your skills.
Yeah.
Then it falls back to your education and your hard skills also, right? And so who would they pick? Like somebody who has the most relevant skills for the market and where our future is going, versus somebody who's just sitting at a bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
Because the bachelor's degree was enough 20 years ago, but it's not anymore. Yeah.
I just had a conversation with Coursera on the worthlessness of an MBA now. Right?
Don't say that. I pay a lot of money for my MBA. Don't say that. But yeah, like it basically goes to say that just you have an MBA doesn't necessarily mean that you stop, like you've enough, right? Like my husband, for example, he has an MBA, and then after his MBA as well, like he self-taught himself Python and machine learning. There's just so many resources available out there, right? I'm self-teaching myself coaching skills because that's where I want to take my third life, as you said, right now, at least for the time being. So I am investing in learning like coaching. I have a coach that I work with. I just joined a mastermind. I am part of a program that teaches coaching skills. And so I'm investing in that, right? This investment of time.
I think you have to. I think we all have to. I've been getting up doing an AI course on Coursera at 4:00 in the morning, and just so to be up to speed on what's going on, because, and I'm looking at it as a survival strategy for the business going, am I missing something? Am I missing something? Like, I need to know this to see if I'm missing something, right? Like,
I mean, like he has an MBA, and yesterday he was asking me, like, he wants to take a 2-day course on like sprint planning and all of that, right? Like, and it's like, because that's relevant to him in his job, right? And so he was like, okay, he's gonna take like a just self-taught, like basically self-taught, teach himself all these other skills, and he has self-taught himself on Data Quest and Coursera and Udemy. Like literally, he has probably Udemy has had so much revenue from him, okay, because he like, keeps buying these courses and upskills himself, and that has kept him relevant. That allowed him to move to a senior product manager machine learning role at GoDaddy without having a degree in machine learning. Right? And so how do you keep yourself relevant in the market? Like, it's a really good question. You continue asking yourself.
And I don't think it's continue asking yourself. Like, I always think that employees should be able to come. They don't know how to manage up. I often say, and managing up is being able, you are correct, to be the instigator of the conversation. Whether it's on the monthly basis as you're going, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? What do I need to skill on? And, and then asking the question, am I adding value and am I useful to the company? And I think that's a scary question to ask and answer for an employee, because sometimes the answer is no, like you're not, right? And for those who ask and answer and go, yes, they're setting themselves up in a great position to negotiate, right? And
I love that. Yeah, I never thought about it this way, but I love that. Like, and that's something I'm going to use now with my clients. That you ask the manager, like, what am I doing right? Am I doing right?
Yeah. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? And, I always,
how am I adding value? Like, how am I adding value? Right.
Yeah.
And then when the time comes, you can basically like use their own words.
Absolutely. And I can say, and I will say to you, and then, Kate, I had I had a conversation that it was a review this morning, and it was really interesting because I still had, and you're correct with women in terms of the conversations, I had to bring it up. Let me now tell you what it is, because I'm very conscious of them missing that opportunity, and go, let me tell you what is going well. Let me tell you what is not going well. Let me tell you what it is you need to do. And I had to drive that because I didn't know how to have that conversation, right?
Yeah. But like at the end of the day, this is your career, right? Like I'm gonna bring it back to, I am a big proponent of this is your career. This is your business. For those of us here who may be running businesses, this is our business. This is our career. It is our responsibility to ask the right questions. It is our responsibility to get feedback. It is not your manager's responsibility to give you feedback.
Yeah.
It's our responsibility to ask the right questions.
Kate?
We have a question in chat from Salish. He's probably waiting for this to answer.
Okay, let's go. Let's go. We were having heated discussions.
Okay, so Salacious thing here, we ask for promotion within company. As you mentioned, the culture of flexibility matters, but company managers take for granted. I've experienced promotion only when I had another offer letter in hand. I don't like doing it, but as window shopping for opportunity is always important for sales background. Yeah, like, you know, and it's such a pity, right? Like if sometimes companies only listen when you have an external opportunity already, and they were like, they're paying heed only when you tell them, like, okay, bye-bye, like you're ready to walk out the door. And yeah, like I'm really gonna challenge you to think about whether that's the right place for you to be in. Like if that's something that happens over and over again, is that the right place for you to be in? And yes, you should always be window shopping. You should always be saying yes to opportunities, even if you're not in the market actively.
It's kind of like raising money when you don't need it for startups. You should always be raising money.
You should always be raising money. You should always be putting out yourself out in the market. You should always be saying yes to interviews. Oh, I'm not like in the market actively, but I would love to list. Like I would love to have a chat with you. And who knows, like what opportunity? Like the best time to be in the market is when you actually don't need it. When you actually need to be.
That's the best time to raise money, also, Richa, when you don't need
it. Exactly, because then you're not coming from this place of fear that I like. And in this tension that I really need this, I need this, like then you already have something great sitting in the bank. You already have an offer like lined up, and you should always be in the market, always be in the market.
So let me ask you this question. How can employees address concerns about job performance and their qualifications when negotiating with their employer?
Can you expand that question a little bit more? Like, what do you mean?
So this was one of your questions, actually. How can employers concerns about job? So let's assume somebody comes for a raise. Let me just give you a story, help, give some context maybe around, but this is your question, my love.
Yeah, I might have missed a word or two from the question as I was kind of giving it to you.
So here is somebody comes for a raise, and the pushback from their employer is, you're not performing, like you don't have the skills we need for this particular job, or the job is evolving and changing, and you don't have the skills for that. How do you?
I think we kind of talked about that a little bit already. It's really bad to if this is coming to you that you have performance concerns, then you have been surprised, and you have been surprised because you haven't been having regular conversations about like how the performance is going, what you're doing right, what you're not doing right, what value you're adding, right? So if you're not having those regular conversations, you will be surprised.
Yeah. But I do have to tell you this, Richa, as a business owner, I'm very, very open about performance, where you're standing. Like you kind of know with me, you're doing good or you're not doing good, right? I'm very, very vocal about those. And I'm also very vocal in the learnings. Culturally, some people take offense to that, and they get very, very nasty about it in terms of, and I found it's my more senior ones are going through career pivots, and they might not have the skills for this new role, but they're like, but I've been in the market for 20 years. What do you think? What do you tell? So how do you deal with that culturally? I would say when you're senior, think about all the senior people out there doing career pivots, and they're starting off just a 20-year-old going for some green job or going for some Web3 job. And they're like, but I'm a senior person. I've already had 20 years in the marketplace. Like, how do you have them manage that? Because that's a really hard one.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I want to hear your perspective, given that you are in that position with
Yeah.
senior leaders. Why don't you start with sharing your perspective, and then maybe I can build up on that a little.
Sure. So I think what I've learned, and I'm sharing this from actually failing, hiring, doing, literally failing in choosing the right people for certain roles who I truly believed, because of their senior 10, 15, 20 years in the workplace, that it would have been, I made the mistake of thinking that their learning agility on the hard skills would come fast in the transition.
Yeah.
And what I've come to realize is that learning agility matters. It's actually real currency.
Yeah.
And what I've also learned is in terms of starting out, emerging technology in areas, everybody is. So I try to really separate the skills from the, your self-motivation from your culture and working with others. So when I'm having a conversation, and that's through trial and error, it's not this lump sum conversation of you failing in the role. It's a conversation of your soft skills developed through your experience, you're thriving in the culture, management, organizational part. In the soft skill or the self-motivation, either you have it or not, right?
Yeah.
But in the actual hard skills to do the job, there's a problem. You just don't have that skill. And I found compartmentalizing it in that way maybe softens the blow in terms of ego and in terms of going, not failing on all the things in it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I think I do. And that's a great perspective, right? And so from a leader's perspective, the hiring manager's perspective, can we think about what is it that 15, 20 years of experience bring to the organization, right? And as I like to say that, we have different type of skills. I like to say that we have 4 different type of skills. Like we have domain skills, the industry that we come from. We have functional skills, like the marketing or finance or business development, like all of these different functions, business functions. We have technical skills and we have leadership skills. Okay. And so when you're interviewing somebody with 15, 20 years of experience and looking to bring them on your team, like what type of transferable skills are they actually bringing in? And the learning curve on the 4 different type of skills that I just mentioned could be at different levels.
Absolutely. And
so just like having that conversation from the beginning as a good leader, as you bring them on, that hey, like on these, like on a scale, this is where we are at to begin with. Like, and I'm here to support you in that learning curve, and then having this joint dialogue throughout the time together, like as they are growing in the company, to like how's that increasing on the 4 different skills.
Yeah.
I think that's as good leaders, like that's the conversation that we need to have with our most senior folks. Okay? And then the senior folks in the room, you have to have some sort of a maturity too, right? Like hopefully that 15, 20 years of experience has given you some maturity on having a performance conversation with calm and control. And if you're being given feedback, to be able to set aside your ego, to really ask the question, okay, so can you give me an example of where, why you say what you say? And have that dialogue. I think that maturity also has to come from the individual, that senior individual, to be able to have that dialogue and take what they need to take.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll wrap up with the final 2 questions. What should employees do if they feel they're being undervalued and underpaid, but their employer is not receptive to negotiation?
Yeah, like first, like you try, right? Like we've gotten so many different tips and tools on how to articulate your value, bringing in these regular cadence and conversation in place so that you are defining joint black and white goals and what success looks like for you to be able to go towards that promotion or the salary raise or that better deal, right? So if you haven't ever had that conversation and so far you've been surprised, like reflect back on how can you maybe have a 3 months, 6 months, or whatever timeline is acceptable to you, but then have a joint conversation by setting like black and white goals and working towards those black and white goals. Okay. And if you've done that work and you still are disappointed, like in the meantime, continue building your BATNA, continue building up your fallback option, like continue putting yourself in the market now while you're working the 6 months to get promoted and get that salary raise or whatever that timeline is for you. Like start that effort now in parallel to increase your BATNA.
Mhm. Any last parting advice for anyone that you want them to know who's currently negotiating?
I think that really like the big parting advice I want to tell everybody is that you know the value that you bring to the table. Okay, like whether you bring this much or whether you bring that much, you know, okay, internally. So you've got to start. One, if you're only bringing this much value, like you got to start bringing this much value now. Okay, like this much is a stable stake. So you have to first increase, like be honest with yourself of like the value that you are bringing to the table, and then start believing in it. Like that's the number one tip I can tell you. Like you have to start believing in yourself that you do bring something to the table. Like you cannot have a good negotiation. Like you cannot win in a negotiations conversation unless you truly believe that you have something to offer, because then you will feel like a fake. So you have to start believing in yourself more.
Okay, good.
And like keep increasing that value that you do bring. If you are the one that is just bringing in so much value. So
yeah. Absolutely. Listen, Richa, this was awesome. This was priceless. Thank you wholeheartedly. So I will say to everyone, and then I will turn it over to Kate. For anyone who is interested in booking Richa, Valerie has a link on there. So, and Richa always has all kinds of interesting projects, networks, webinars. So, make sure and follow her. In terms of Richa, reach out to Valerie, who is Mentor Community, if you're interested on the GLEAC platform of, having Richa with somebody else within your company around this particular issue. And I want to thank all of you. Some of you have been here for the whole 3 hours. This was like a learning marathon. So I want to thank all of you. Richa, all of our talks go on our platforms, and we power Yoma in Africa, we power the Jayo platform, so we get to spread you wide and tall, beyond everyone here. So I want to thank all of you wholeheartedly for attending.